If you have ever bought a wooden chair in Walmart, IKEA, Home Depot, or any other cheap furniture maker for that matter, there's a chance it could have been made illegally using illegal wood. Okay, I'll admit it. That sounds kind of lame, but it's a business that in some cases is more profitable than cocaine. While at the same time, since no one gives a damn, it's trivially easy to get away with. So easy in fact that some criminals have straight up begun hiding drugs, weapons, ivory, any kind of illicit good you could imagine inside shipments of illegal wood as a safe way to smuggle it. Yes, it's that easy, and so you put these two things together and you find a golden opportunity that's exploited by basically any group of bad guys you could ever imagine. Mexican drug cartels, psychotic dictators, Islamist terrorist groups, fascist juntas. Heck, back in the 90s, it was even exploited by the Khmer Rouge. Now, for those who don't know who they are, they were a group of absolutely psychotic communists that during their just 4 years in power in Cambodia managed to kill off a staggering 25% of their own people. Yes, those guys. But how is any of this possible? How can something funding such horrible people so easily make its way into our furniture and with so little attention? And what the does illegal wood even mean? Well, to understand that, let's take a little look at one of the worst offenders here in Europe where I live. Romania. In 2017, Romania got a new minister for water and forests, Adriana Doinapana, who quickly went to work tackling the country's massive illegal logging problem. She was poisoned within a matter of months. On the ground, forest rangers and environmental watchdogs are frequently beaten, threatened, and in some cases killed by armed thugs. See, I mention this because illegal logging, the act of cutting down a tree you're not allowed to and then selling off the wood in some form, happens all over the world. However, the really large-scale, harmful stuff fueling our furniture giants almost exclusively happens in poor countries with weak or corrupt governments, allowing timber giants to use bribes and intimidation to cut like absolute lunatics, disregarding any rules regulating how much they're allowed to cut, which are laws that exist so that you don't end up like British Columbia and Canada, where as a result of decades of over-chopping, between 2001 and 2023, almost half the people employed in the forestry sector lost their jobs, which in certain communities, according to some researchers, has provided decent manpower to organized crime groups. While the lack of healthy mature forest cover itself also creates a slew of other problems. But more on that later, because before we get to that, I first want to talk a little bit about slavery. See, another way for the wood inside your chair to be illegal is if it was harvested using slave labor. This often takes place in tropical regions of the world, where poverty-stricken, uneducated men desperate for work are lured in by promises of good work and a stable income. Not knowing what they're signing on to, they'll be put into a literally unpayable debt and then driven deep into the rainforests where they're worked to death. Although in some even more outrageous examples, all of these steps can be outright skipped as the slaves are already right where they need to be, in that they're natives who have lived there for generations and who are now forced to mow down all the valuable trees on their ancestral homelands, after which they have to stand by and watch as the remaining vegetation is burned down, clearing it out, allowing the crew to move deeper into the rainforest while the land itself can now be used for agriculture, which here in the tropical regions is in itself also notorious for its use of slave labor. All the while, these people won't see even a sliver of the money generated from all this. In fact, the profits will actively contribute to undermining their chances at a better future by fueling corruption, organized crime, and in some cases, war. Although far from their only source of income during the various Afghan conflicts, terrorist groups such as the Taliban and later on the Islamic State of Khorasan made sure to extract as much money as possible out of illegal logging through taxes and extortion. While in parts of Western Africa, certain species of rosewood have earned the name bloodwood, largely owing to the sheer number of terrorist and rebel groups exploiting particularly Chinese demand for this durable and highly profitable wood, which is used in traditional and very expensive Hongmu furniture. Heck, on this topic of conflict timber, earlier I mentioned the Khmer Rouge. Remember those communist sickos that slaughtered 25% of their people during a 4-year reign? Well, it was to fund a thankfully failed guerrilla war to retake power that they used illegal logging, at its peak bringing them in upwards of $10 to $20 million a month. That is not small potatoes, especially not for a relatively small country. In fact, globally, despite most people not even knowing about it, illegal logging is estimated to be worth between $52 to $157 billion a year. For reference, in the high-end example, that would make it bigger than the global cocaine trade, which also sort of begs the question I asked in the beginning. How? I mean, for obvious reasons, you can't smuggle wood the same way you can with drugs. In other words, all of this has to be going on in plain sight, behind a thin facade of legitimacy. And part of the reason why that's possible actually has to do with pizza. And I'm not kidding. So I'm gonna tell my little assistant right here to go get me a slice. And while we're waiting for that, I'll introduce you to another country in the meantime. Belarus. For many years, various EU companies exploited the extremely low costs of labor at Belarus's largest timber company, the prison service. Now, Belarus is by no means unique in using prisoners as slave labor, but what makes them particularly outrageous is 1. The horrendous conditions, with beatings and torture being widespread, and 2. The more than 1,300 political prisoners. Brave and heroic freedom fighters who've been persecuted for opposing the disgusting dictatorial regime of this filthy animal who's referred to by his own people as tarakaniche. In English, cockroach. Pizza's here! Perfect timing! See, for a long time, Belarus had a tough time getting its slave-made wood products onto the lucrative EU market, and this slice of pizza shows us how they got in. See, if we look closely at the paper wrapping that it comes in, we'll find this little logo, the seal of approval of the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC. And heck, it's not just pizza wrapping either. Here in Western Europe where I live, you'll find on basically anything made of wood. Books, milk cartons, lettuce, cardboard boxes, this binder that I use for my business documents, whatever the hell this is, receipts, and last but not least, toilet paper. See, it's the gold standard when it comes to timber certification, with many big EU companies buying almost exclusively FSC certified wood as a way to assert that it's been harvested in a legal, sustainable, and socially acceptable way. It's essentially the golden ticket into tree-hugging hippie Europe. The problem is that it sucks. See, going back to Belarus for a moment, on October 2nd, 2020, the director of the prison service, Oleg Matkin, was personally sanctioned by the EU, citing, and I quote, inhumane and degrading treatment, including torture. Yet just 6 weeks later, on November 12th, the FSC officially certified one of the most notorious labor camps in the entire Belarusian prison system, Labor Colony Number 2, which has held and tortured both opposition leader Andrei Sannikov and Nobel Peace Prize winner Ales Bialyatsky, allowing it to join a group of several other just as horrific Belarusian prisons, making bank off the EU market, all thanks to slave labor and their FSC certification. And what makes it worse is that this isn't just a small isolated incident either. At one point, a village in the DRC was promised a school and a clinic in exchange for logging rights on their lands, but received nothing. They protested only for the FSC certified logging company to call in the corrupt police, which went on a rampage, killing 1, injuring several, and raping 6 women, including 3 minors. Now, the company did lose its certification, but got it right back just 2 years later. While in Russia's Far East, the FSC has given its golden ticket to this asshole, who's responsible for bulldozing tons of protected forests, while never cleaning his wooden waste up, creating an obvious fire hazard, which becomes even more concerning when you you consider that a lot of Russian forest lies on permafrost. See, normally reckless clear-cuts increase the frequency of floods by taking away vegetation that would normally have sucked up tons of water, while idiotic logging roads can lead to landslides. However, add to all that a typically frozen soil that is suddenly being thawed up and everything just gets worse. Oh, and did I mention that permafrost contains ungodly amounts of carbon as well? Yet the worst part about all this is that legally, the FSC shouldn't even have this kind of power. The only reason why they do is because no one gives a damn about this. See, I mentioned Russia and Belarus just now. Obviously, as I'm making this, they're in a bit of a weird position. But putting that to the side for a moment, basically all Western countries have laws banning the import of illegal wood. The problem is that they're under-enforced and almost criminally neglected. I mean, for example, despite all the scandals, FSC certificates are still frequently just accepted as proof of due diligence, which is an absolute travesty. See, the free world imports a lot of wood and can therefore, with a bit more political will, have a massive impact in forcing more companies to go in a better direction. Now, of course, let's not be naive. This isn't some magical cure-all potion that can completely end this massive and destructive illicit trade. But more people just giving a damn can have a very positive impact. But do you know what would make an even bigger difference? Smashing the like button with an axe. Or perhaps a finger would do just fine. I think it'll do the trick. But anyway, on a final note, I would like to encourage you all to go check out the Environmental Investigation Agency and Earthside. Two groups of absolute alpha males and females who put their own lives on the line to go undercover and investigate these massive timber mafias providing illegal wood for your chairs. But other than that, all I really have left to say is have a nice day and adios amigo.